Thank you for the wonderful introduction and for the invitation. And I would also like to thank Dana for her work with the details. I would like to recognize my brother Petros and the Park and Jarek, all friends from recent times, not long time ago. Right. And today we'll talk about how to find patterns in large graphs. First, we'll see the motivation. Why do we need to study big graphs? Then we'll see how some typical patterns in large graphs, and then time-evolving graphs. Is the microphone okay? Too strong? Too weak? Okay, it's okay. Okay. So let's see why should we care about graphs? Well, the World Wide Web is probably one of the most influential graphs in the past few decades. There is a publicly available scroll from the web, 1 billion nodes, 6 billion edges. It has some very strange patterns, degree distributions, too many triangles, occasionally too few triangles, but we want to find patterns. Of course, social networks is the rage in the past 10 years, right? Facebook has publicly announced that it has more than 1 billion users. For those who pay attention to the stock market, it is valuating more than about 30 or 50 billions of dollars, depending on fluctuations. All the other social networks are changing lives. LinkedIn, Twitter, right? Twitter played a major role in the Arab Spring and also in several revolutions in other places, right? Google Plus, Yahoo, and so on and so forth, right? But the list continues. Graphs don't necessarily have to have humans as nodes. They could have autonomous systems. So let me see if this is visible. Yes. So here, this is a snapshot of the internet from the 90s. Every dot is an autonomous system like york.edu.ca or cmu.edu. They're connected if there is a link between them. How does this graph look like? Are there hubs and authorities? Are there central nodes? Are there cliques? Graphs could also be prey-predator relationships, could be biological species, and so here is the plankton, here the sardines, here is the tuna, here is the shark, right? Who eats what? Which species, if it becomes extinct, which will the ecological food web unravel or not? And the list continues. Blogs, 10 years ago, blogs were the rage, now it's the Facebook walls, right? Then the question is, whose blog is the most influential? The blog that everybody else points to, again, it's a graph. Now a blog is a node, pointers to that are edges, again, PageRank, what's the most important blog, and so on. Computer security, every machine is a node, mails to this machine are the edges. Is our machine under attack? Spam attack or DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, or what? Recommendation systems is the bipartite graph. How many of you are familiar with the Netflix competition? Yes, okay, right. So that was a bipartite graph. People who write ratings about movies. And Netflix want to figure out which movie to recommend to you so that you remain a customer and they continue their business model, right? In general, every time we have a many-to-many relationship, for those of you with those of us with a database background, any many-to-many relationship eventually becomes a graph. So graphs are in many cases, not only social networks. So we'll divide the talk in two parts. First, how do we find patterns and how do we spot fraud and strange patterns in graphs? And the second is for static graphs. And then how do we find patterns in time-evolving graphs? And the point I want to make is that patterns and anomaly detection goes hand in hand. If somebody shows us these 5 points, is there anything strange there? Well, if we don't pay attention, no, nothing looks strange. But if we notice that, hey, these 4 points are on a line, then the point that stands out of the line is suspicious now, right? So the point is that patterns and anomalies are the flip sides of the same coin, right? And for time-evolving graphs, we have a source, destination, and then time. So we have a bunch of adjacency matrices stacked one after the other. Technically, this is called a tensor. How do we find patterns given tensors? Let's go to the first part. How do we find patterns in static graphs? I think we could feel free to ask questions. I'll give short answers and keep the long answers for after the talk if you want. So, patterns and fraud detection. Are real graphs random? If we plot the autonomous systems, this is york.ca.edu, this is cmu.edu. If we plot them like that, nothing shows. This is actually, sociologists call it a dead star, right? Because nothing shows. But it turns out that real graphs are not random. They have, I'm sure all of us have heard of the 6 degrees of separation. Some of us have wasted time with the Kevin Bacon oracle. I won't go into details except offline, right? And there are also patterns with the in and out degree distribution. There are very skewed degree distribution that we're discussing with Frank. And there are also other surprising patterns. So let's look at the data. The first static pattern, S1, is that if we take the autonomous systems, which look messy, and if we do what Zip did 50 years ago, the Zip plot, right? So if we plot the degree of every node, so here is AT&T.com with the highest degree, 800 connections. That was April 97, right? And the rank, horizontal axis rank, so this is rank 1. IBM has 600 connections with rank 2. This is not surprising, these are all big technology giants. It makes sense that they have a lot of connections, right? What looks like a mess on the left fits a line very well. The horizontal axis, as we said, rank in logarithmic scales, the vertical axis degree in logarithmic scales. A line fits very well. The slope is minus 0.8. If it was 1, it would be exactly the Zip distribution. Now it's a generalized Zip distribution. And this is joint work with Petros and the other brother, Michalis. So why is this important? Not only it's surprising that such an unruly system with no central authority, right? Everybody can connect to everybody he or she wants, right? Once you create an autonomous system. However, there seems to be an invisible hand that keeps everybody along this line. The second important thing, and we open a parenthesis here, the second important thing is that the prevailing assumption would be Gaussian, right? If the average degree of everybody is 3.2, then everybody should be around 2 to 4, right? If we do the Gaussian assumption in the same scales, it would be something like that, like a boomerang shape, which is qualitatively wrong. Not only it's statistically wrong, it's completely the wrong model, right? And okay, so this is wrong, so why is this an issue if we want to create algorithms? It is an issue because it can lead us to wrong performance decisions. Consider the following query. Very innocent looking query, find the friends of friends, right? We log in on Facebook, I have 50 friends, you probably have more, right? How many two-step away friends does everybody have? So suppose Facebook wants to figure out all the pairs of two-step away friends, right? If we do a back of the envelope calculation with the Gaussian assumption, right? We'll say, let's say that the average is 100 friends, so each of the 100 friends has 100 more, so 100 square, right? So every guy should have 100 square two-step away friends. We have 1 billion people total. Therefore, do the math, it's about 1 trillion, so this would fit in a few disks, right? The math is right, the assumption is wrong. What is happening is that what matters is the maximum degree. Yes, the average has 100, but there is one person, not shown here, but Justin Bieber has 10 million followers. President Barack Obama has 8 million followers. Other personalities, big personalities, also have several million followers. And what matters is the square of these followers, the square of the highest degree. So Justin Bieber will generate, we said 10 million square two-step away friends just because of Justin Bieber. Which means that just for Justin Bieber, we need about 1 petabyte of data. This is a photograph of a quarter petabyte. This is the Data Center Observatory at CMU, headed by Professor Gar Gibson and Greg Anger, right? And this is more or less a quarter of this room, right? So this whole room would probably hold 2 or 3 petabytes, right? So filled up with machines and cables and air conditioning and all that, right? So what the Gaussian assumption would hope it will fit in 2 disks. Eventually it will need a whole data center. That's why it's important to stay away from the Gaussian distribution when it's so grossly violated. We'll call it the Gaussian trap, and we'll see it a few more times. So the high-level idea is that when there are such patterns, Q-degree distributions, this leaves the room for new algorithms. If we know that there is a huge degree followed by a second big degree by a third big degree, we should do a different algorithm. And Twitter, they have a solution for that. They have a whole server dedicated to Justin Bieber because when it's his birthday, this machine goes down, right? But at least it doesn't bring down the rest of the machines, right? So it needs we need to keep track of that. The other observation is that for big data, quadratic algorithms are intractable. We have a parenthesis within a parenthesis, right? So suppose we have a quadratic algorithm. Say you have 1 billion people at Facebook, compute all the similarities from everybody to everybody, right? So that we can do clustering and all that. This is doable if we have 1,000 people, but if we have a billion people, then let me give you some back-of-the-envelope calculations, right? Suppose that the similarity function takes 1 second. Then we need n square seconds, which means 31 billion years with a standard machine. This is twice the age of the universe. This is a galaxy from the Hubble telescope, right? Okay, so let's throw in parallelism. If we have 1,000 machines, which are within budget of a typical university, this brings us back to 31 million years ago. Oops, where the dinosaurs go? Okay, yes. So if we have 1 million machines, which is within budget of a huge company like Google or a big government, right? Still 31,000 years ago, we see the mastodons here, right? If we go for broke, everybody in the United States decides to give up the salary for a whole year, right? This is the GDP of the United States, 12 trillion, let's round up to 10. It would still take 3 years to compute the time to graduate. It would still take 3 years to do this computation. So quadratic algorithms for large data sets are completely out of the question, even if we have a huge budget for parallelism. This closes the parenthesis and we'll continue with more patterns. The second pattern is that singular values, eigenvalues, also seem to follow a strange distribution. So we don't expect people to remember the definition of the singular values. This is exactly it. The idea is that if we load the adjacency matrix, which is connected to whom, if we load it to MATLAB and press a button, we can get the top 100 singular values, right? So this is the rank, this is the absolute value of the eigenvalue, right? Again, in log-log scales, we see that the line fits well. So let's see how we can find more patterns. The third static pattern is that there are strange behavior of triangles. Sociologists say that real social networks have many more triangles than expected. Why? Because suppose this is us, this is 2 of our friends. Sooner or later we'll introduce them to each other, we'll throw a party or something, so the triangle will close. So the question is, if this is a node of interest, this node of interest has degree 3, what can you say for the number of triangles it participates? This node participates in 1, 2 triangles, right? So one would say that if you're on Facebook and you have twice as many friends as I do, you should probably participate in twice as many triangles, right? Actually wrong. What happens is that in several data sets, so this is opinion.com, who trusts whom, this is a anonymized social network, this is another data set. In all of these cases, the horizontal axis is the number of triangles. Every dot is a user. This is Smith, right? Smith has degree such and such, 1,000, and participates in so many triangles. In all these cases, the slope is about 1.6, 1.7, which means that if we have n friends, we should participate in n to the 1.6, n squared root of n triangles. Or alternatively, if we do the math, double the friends, triple the triangles. Right? Not double the triangles, not quadruple the triangles, right? How do we estimate the number of triangles? If we do it the standard SQL way, the standard database way, this is 3 lines of code, but we hit the Justin Bieber problem, right? It's proportional, it's a 3-way join, and it is proportional to the highest degree. So Justin Bieber will flood our data set, right? Can we do it faster? It turns out that it's a homework exercise in matrix algebra, that the sum of cube of eigenvalues, remember the definition we didn't emphasize, right? The sum of cube of eigenvalues is exactly the number of triangles. So all we have to do is load our matrix in MATLAB or some module that can do eigenvalues, compute them and cube them. And there are 2 pieces of good news. The first is that the eigenvalue of a sparse matrix is proportional to the number of edges, not the total number of possible edges, only the existing edges, which is usually small, right? And the second is that since the eigenvalues are skewed, and since we're planning to cube them, if we keep only the top 10 eigenvalues, their cube will obliterate everything else. So keeping the top 10 eigenvalues is good enough to estimate the number of triangles. So matrix algebra comes to our matrix algebra in combination with the observation that we had before of skewness of eigenvalues comes to help. Okay, so how is this useful? It is useful because now we can spot strange behavior. This is the Twitter data set, 3 billion edges crawled by Brendan Meader, and I'll tell you the horror stories he was telling us when he was crawling. Eventually he got the data, and every dot is a user. We ignore directionality in this example. The horizontal axis degree, so President, back then he was candidate, Senator Barack Obama, had 2 million followers, right? And participated in roughly 10 to the 8 times, right? Other charities are also equally high. What can we say about the rest? Log scales again, log degree versus log number of participating triangles. What can we say about the slope? Should it be 1? Should it be 2? Should it be 1.5? It turns out it's about 1.5. We don't show the rest of the points here because there are too many. Here are other personalities. Hillary Clinton was, back this is 2008, so she was running as a candidate too. Sarah Palin was the vice presidential candidate. So they're all along a line of 1.5. Okay, so there are no surprises, except that I didn't tell you that there was a little cloud of points here, which is 4 orders of magnitude away from the line, right? So what is happening with these accounts is that they have a degree about 10,000, 20,000, but they participate in a huge number of triangles. Why? Probably because they form cliques, right? And here is a 5 clique. And why do they form cliques? Probably, actually not probably, we looked at them and they were mainly accounts that they were trying adult advertisers or selling Viagra and other gray market areas. So they wanted to look important, so they probably created the sock puppet, the same account many times, and they were all pointing to each other to deceive people that they were important. And this is something that shows up very easily if we do the triangles with eigenvalue and matrix algebra representation we mentioned before. And we're thankful for Yahoo for giving us access to M45, one of the biggest supercomputers at that time. So, are there other patterns? Yes, Lemana Koglu came up with around 11 patterns in her dissertation. We already covered the first 3. Right? Sure. I'm sorry. Okay, now it shows. Okay, so three patterns, and we have 11 total. That was 2009. Further analysis showed even more patterns, right? And we have a book which is available on every library, available for free in PDF, which has a few more patterns too. So let's see how we can do anomaly detection, right? We mentioned that patterns and anomalies go hand in hand. So the first part is copycats, which was being used by Facebook and probably still being used. This is work by Alex Butel, who is graduating from CMU this year. The goal is given who likes what. Here are the users, here are products, and then there are users who say, I like this product. This user says, I like Batman. This user says, I like Spy vs. Spy, for those of us old enough to remember Mad Magazine, right? Anybody know? Okay. Anyway, some other product, right? And so on and so forth. So the question is, should we trust all these thumbs up or not? Because people get money to lie and say, yes, this is a good product, right? The telltale sign of fake likes is lockstep. This is a well-trained army, right? Walking in lockstep. What happens? Bad guys also work in lockstep because it's cheap, right? So what we want. So here is here are the people, here are the products. The color, the edge means that this person likes this product, and the color means is color coded the time. So the beginning of the experiment is red, then it becomes yellow, then it becomes green. Here it is visible, right? And again, then it becomes purple, right? So we have the adjacency matrix. Here are all the users, here are all the products. Every dot means that this user liked this product, and this dot is orange, so this means it was probably the first third of the experiment, right? What we want is to reorganize the rows and the columns so that if there are blocks, if there are some guys, 5, 6, 7, 10, 100 people, and if there are 10, 20, 30 products, that all these people like all these products, and the vertical lines have the same color, then this means that all these people worked in lockstep and gave a thumbs up to this product. The same people, or more or less the same people, there are some gaps here, as you may see, right? The same people also worked in lockstep a few days later and gave a thumbs up to another product. If we find such a box like that, or such a box like that, we want to report it and say these guys are lying and these products don't deserve the attention, don't deserve the thumbs up. How should we do that? How would we devise an algorithm which will reorder the rows and the calls of the matrix, or even without reordering, how we could spot groups of people and groups of products that have this vertical stripe pattern? So this is the goal. We are given a matrix and we want to find these dense blocks after appropriate reordering. The algorithm is heuristics. It is running on Hadoop because this is implemented at Facebook. And the algorithm is probabilistic. It says, let's, either right or wrong, let's blame one product. Let's pretend this is a bad product that paid people to give it a thumbs up. Whoever liked it at the peak of attention is probably lying, right? Maybe right, maybe wrong, but let's do that, right? So these people are blamed in the next iteration. Okay, if we believe that these are liars, everything else they clicked at is probably a lie too, right? Now we have 3 suspicious products. Now let's go back again, and forth, and so on. If this stabilizes, then this means that our guess was right. If it doesn't stabilize and start dissipating, then it means that we blamed an honest product and we should give up. If we do this algorithm again and again, we have high chance of getting a lot of the bad guys. Not guaranteed to get them all, but high chance to get several of them. So this is the number of accounts that were caught by this algorithm as time goes by. And notice that it is going down, which the explanation is probably because the bad guys do not make money anymore. The Facebook blanks out their thumbs up, right? And therefore they give up. Either they give up or they smarten up and try to do something even smarter that Facebook cannot catch yet. Either way, they gave up on this specific trick. Let's skip that part. Spectral methods and singular white decomposition can help us find even more anomalies. So here is, what we noticed here is that clicks are suspicious. Remember the adult advertisers. So here is a click. Bipartite cores are also suspicious, like the copycats that we mentioned before. What happens if it's a huge big click, we'll spot it. If it's a huge big bipartite core, we'll also spot it, right? What happens if it's a small click, 50 by 50 as opposed to 1,000 by 1,000, right? The idea one step forward, the idea by Neil Shah and Alex Butel again is, let's do the singular value decomposition. Let's give a rank of 100, and then let's reconstruct the degrees of every node. So the horizontal axis, every dot is a node, so Smith, Johnson, Thompson, Obama, whatever, right, Lady Gaga, right? The horizontal axis is the degree of every node, the vertical axis, the degree we can reconstruct after singular value decomposition. So if we had perfect reconstruction, everybody with rank 100, everybody should be along this red line. We don't, so we see that the majority is somewhere here, right? We see some microclusters here which are suspicious, but we didn't spend time investigating. What is standing out is that there is a huge group of people here with these logarithmic scales, right? Which is 17 to 25, 8 orders of magnitude below, apart from everybody else, right? And these are suspicious, right? They don't follow the general pattern. Let's look at them. What happens is that some of these accounts are not even trying to hide that they're fraudsters. They say, sign up and you'll get 400 followers, or follow me and you'll get 400 followers, right? Obviously these followers are robots and obviously they're lying, right? Why should they follow somebody who does not deserve it, right? So the idea is that we can spot with spectral methods, is another tool that we can use to spot strange behavior like this one. The list continues. How would we measure suspiciousness? This is very recent. This is 2 months old, ICTM 2015, November. So the question is, we have a matrix, users and products, and we have a bunch of users and a bunch of products which are very dense. So here is 500 people with 200 products, 20% full. Which is more suspicious, this one or this one, which is 20 people with 50 product but 99% full? It's hard to tell, right? They're both sort of suspicious. How would we rank them? And the reason we want to rank them is because if LinkedIn or Facebook employees have limited time, we want to give them a sorted list of what is the most suspicious group they should focus on, right? The question becomes even harder. Suppose we have three modes, source, destination, and timestamp. Now we have a dense block, 2 by 3 by 10, 90% full, versus another block, 3 by 5 by 9, which is super full, right? How do we compare these two? How do we compare a 3-mode block with a 2-mode block? It turns out that the answer, after a lot of compression theory and information theory, the answer is that it depends on the volume of the blocks. A block is more suspicious if it has bigger volume, and this is the KL divergence of two Poisson distributions. Eventually, the second part is the contrast between the density of the block you have, this density, and the background density. The background density is usually tiny, 10 to the minus 10, right, that we're discussing, right, in several real graphs. So this is a formula which will say, if you tell me a block, I'll tell you how suspicious it is, so that you can rank your blocks. And applying this formula, we can develop an algorithm which will create bigger and bigger blocks until the suspiciousness score becomes bad. And here is one of the suspicious blocks. This is the so-called crosspot method, which on this specific data set, this is from Tencent, the Chinese Twitter, right? It found a block of 25 people, just one tweet, the very same tweet, everybody was saying the same thing, right? From 2 IP addresses within 200 minutes. And there were 27,000 tweets. So the text was the same, the people were the same. They retweeted it a gazillion times, right? They retweeted it 27,000 times. And this is the suspiciousness score. And we see that this is the first user, anonymized, let's call this person John123, tweeted this thing from the blue IP address at 10:09, then took a rest, then 10 minutes later from the cross IP address, remember there were 2 IP addresses, 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, 5 minutes later, right? So this person is a machine gun, it must be a robot, right? It cannot be a human retweeting the same thing again and again every 5 minutes. And the same is true for Joy 546, for Job 798. These are all fake names, right? Anonymized. But it's very suspicious. Third part on trying to spot anomalies. Let's see the powerful method of belief propagation. Some of you may have heard of it, especially if you're working with Bayesian models and graphical models. So the goal is, this was joint work with Paulo Zhao, now professor at Georgia Tech, and Shashank Pandit. The goal is we have eBay accounts, so every node is an eBay user, and an edge means that there was a successful transaction between the two. So this node sold something to that node, and they gave positive feedback to each other. Almost all feedbacks on eBay are positive. The negative feedback is declaration of war, and usually one of the accounts will shut down, or because people almost never complain by etiquette, right? So the question is, how to spot the so-called, there are many types of fraud, of course, as you can imagine. One type of fraud is the so-called non-delivery fraud. So this person says, I can sell you a laptop for $3,000, right? Do you trust this person? Would you send your hard-earned money to this person? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positive feedbacks, right? So this person looks honest enough, right? How about this person? If this person says, I'll send you the laptop for $3,000, 1, 2 feedback. So probably, backtrack, this is probably a more honest person than this person, right? Actually, it's the other way around. If we look 2 steps away, we see that this person participates in a bipartite core. By now, we should start being suspicious of bipartite cores. And actually, what is happening is that that was a brilliant observation by Paulo back then, that fraudsters create bipartite cores in order to set up the following amazingly clever scheme. There are the bad guys. So the red means fraudster, yellow means accomplice, we'll describe it, and green are honest people. This is what our algorithm comes up with. And what the fraudsters are doing, they're creating probably sock puppets. Maybe this is the same person, Smith 123, Smith 124, Smith 125. This is Johnson 123, Johnson 124, right? But what is happening is Smith 123 is there for a long time, has been with eBay for several years. has never done anything bad, had actually honest transaction with honest people, so bought a glass of water, a bottle of chewing gum or something, right, for a small amount. They don't want to buy expensive things because eBay gets a percentage of the selling price, so that costs them, right? So the yellow people haven't done anything bad, except they give good feedbacks to the red people, themselves misguided or friends misguided. So this way the bad guys look very honest if we look just one step away. They get your $3,000, they don't send the laptop, and of course we complain, and then eBay shuts them down, right? This account, after a while, it is shut down. But it is easy for the fraudster to continue. It will create another account, Johnson 345. Johnson will get positive feedback from himself, right, or herself. And for a small price, right, I bought a piece of chewing gum, I bought whatever, right? So the scheme is ready to fire again, right? So how do we spot it? It turns out that if we have a compatibility matrix, a 3x3 compatibility matrix, like that, which says honest people usually interact with honest people, high value, blue means high, or with accomplices, right? Almost never they interact with dishonest people, because that's when they get scammed, and this happens very rarely. Accomplices interact with honest people and with fraudsters, but they don't interact with accomplices because it doesn't give them any benefit, right? It costs them money without benefiting, right? And fraudsters mainly with accomplices to boost up their score, right? So if we have this compatibility matrix, and if we apply the belief propagation, which says assume everybody is 1/3 honest, 1/3 accomplice, 1/3 fraudster, start passing messages around. We can bias things a little bit. If somebody has been with eBay for a long time, probably this person is honest, right? Not fraudster, right? So if we bias things a little bit, and then we start passing messages. If I'm honest, then you must be either honest or accomplice. If you are honest, if you are a fraudster, then your friends must be accomplices, and so on and so forth. Passing messages around, eventually the values will stabilize, and we'll get red, green, and blue values for the nodes of the graph. And then the red and yellow values, nodes are the suspicious ones. We applied this algorithm on a crawl from the data, and it turned out that a week later, the accounts which were either yellow or red, usually they were shut down by eBay because there were a lot of complaints. And it was in the news, and Washington Post, and USA Today. And actually we got a message from somebody claiming that he was from the Belgian police and wanted a copy of our code. And we were sort of scared because who knows where it came from, so we didn't reply. Yeah, could be the who knows what. Right, so let's see some other application of belief propagation, which is exactly exploiting network effects, right? As we mentioned before, what tells us that this is a fraudster is the vicinity, it's its neighbors, and the neighbors of the neighbors, right? So let's see other application of network effects and belief propagation. This is again with Polo Chow and colleagues from Symantec. And the problem is the following. 60 terabytes of data collected anonymous by Symantec. For every machine, if you have a Symantec antivirus program running on your machine, then this will be one of these will be your machine. And for every file, for every executable file you have on your machine, the Symantec software assigns a score, and it says, I know this is clean. This has a hash code. This has a signature which is verified clean. Microsoft Excel, the official copy. I haven't seen this signature before, so I leave it gray. Gray, right? I know this is infected because this is exactly the signature of the infected copy of Microsoft Excel with the Melissa virus or whatever. So this is red. So with static analysis, with the signature analysis, this is what Symantec could do until then, right? Don't know, dishonest, or infected, don't know. The idea was to exploit network effects. If we know that this is infected, if we know that this is honest, and this is honest, probably the owner of this machine is a very careful person that does not go to strange websites and download software left and right. So the bigger chance is that, so this is careful, and therefore the question mark is probably green too. If this is infected, then the owner of this machine is probably careless, so whatever is a question mark there is probably bad too, right? So the idea again is that files send messages to machines, machines send messages back to files, and eventually we can fill up the gray scores. Running this algorithm, this again guilt by association. If all your files are, if several of your files are infected, your machine is dangerous, right, or the other way around. So running this on a large-scale graph, 37 billion edges, it turned out that it gave better scores. Semantic will not tell how much was the improvement for obvious copyright, for obvious reasons, right? But this is the ideal point. We want to have 0 false positives and 100% true positives, and it was about 85% true positives for tiny false positives. For settings, asymmetric settings like that, the false positive rates have to be very small, because otherwise there are so many false alarms that people turn off the warnings, right? So this was an improvement. So the summary of the first part is that there are many patterns in real graphs, the 6 degrees of separation, the degree distribution. We notice the Gaussian trap, right, that the average might be much smaller than the maximum, right? The average number of friends in Facebook is 400, I think, but the maximum is 10 million, right, or whatever is max, Justin Bieber, right? And there is a long list of anomaly detection. We saw copycats, we saw the spectral methods, we saw the belief propagation, and so on. We'll go to the second part of the talk, which is how to study time-evolving graphs. So the idea now is, for a static graph, we have Smith, let's say we have a who calls whom. So here are 1 million people in the, 2 million people in the Toronto area, right? Who pick up the phone, and here are the same 2 million people who are being called, right? So if Smith called Johnson, we have a dot here in that adjacency matrix. Smith calls other friends, and Johnson calls other friends. So for this day, we have all these dots, right? This is for today. For tomorrow, we have another adjacency matrix. For the day after, we have another adjacency matrix. If we put them all one after the other, we get something that looks like a data cube for people with database background, or technically a tensor, right? And there are many more settings where we could have more than 2 modes. We could have publications, right, authors with keywords and date. So if Smith publishes a paper on support vector machines in 2010, then we have Smith and support vector machines and at the appropriate time. Does not have to, the third axis does not have to be timed. We could have Tom Mitchell, a colleague at CMU, is working on the never-ending language learner, the NEL project, which says, let's collect sentences from the web, do named entity extraction, and then we have facts which are triplets: subject, verb, object. Obama is president of US, right? Smith, Steve Jobs was the vice president, was the CEO of Apple, right? So we have all this subject, verb, object, and then we want to find patterns. We want to find the politicians, we want to find the CEOs, we want to find the artists, and so on. And the list continues. We could have 3 modes and many more, right? Moreover, sometimes we have the subject, verb, object that we mentioned before, so that's a nice clear tensor, but we may have side information for every subject, let's say apple, hammer, dog. We may have the brain activity from a person when this person is shown the photograph of a hammer, of a dog, of an airplane, right? Right. So suppose that this corresponds to the word apple, this is a subject. The fact is apple tastes sweet, right? And we have a human who agreed to go in an fMRI machine, and we see that these voxels of the human get activated. So the question is, if we have the word orange here, can we guess which parts of the brain will get activated? Or the other way around, if we see these voxels getting activated, what types of verbs or what types of objects create this activity? So we would like to analyze the coupled tensor and the matrix together. So let's see details. The 3-fold introduction to singular value decomposition and tensor decomposition. There's a lot of material, right? If we have only 2 modes, users buying products from a grocery store, and if we are unbelievably lucky for them to form beautiful blocks like that, so all these people are buying meat products, chicken, pork, lamb, and so on. All these people buy vegetarian products only. right? Tofu, rice, and so on. And all these people buy wheat products, right? Cookies and lollipops, right? If we do singular value decomposition, then the singular value decomposition in this beautiful case, the toy case, will create effectively hard clustering, right? We get the vector u1 and the vector v1. The vector u1 will have 0 everywhere except for the meat eaters, Smith, Johnson, and Thompson. And the v1 vector will have 0 everywhere except for the meat products, chicken, pork, and whatever else. The same for the second vector, the same for the third vector, right? So this is the idea behind singular value decomposition. If there are blocks, beautiful, nicely separated blocks, SVD will spot them. Tensors do the same for if we have a third node. So we have subject, verb, object. So here we have Obama is president of the US, Merkel is chancellor of Germany, and so on and so forth, right? If we do the decomposition, we have a triplet of vectors, and some colleagues call it chicken feet, right? We have this triplet of vectors where politicians will have high scores, Obama, Merkel, and so on, right? Justin Trudeau. And here we have organizations, United States, Canada, Germany, China, and so on. And here we have verbs which correspond to leadership, right? President is chancellor, leads, decides, and so on. The next triplet, the next chicken feed would be, let's say, for some other latent variable, let's say artists, the next would be for athletes, and so on and so forth, right? So if we do this decomposition, we'll get a lot of, we'll get a good understanding of what is in this tensor. So we did this on a real data set. Of course, Anomalies was a Foucault's home from a small country in Europe, 4 million people calling the same 4 million people over 15 days. So this is Kohler, Collie for 4 million, right? And this was 15. If we do the decomposition, we get several triplets. The first triplet was boring, right? It said that over time there are a lot of phone calls during the week and there are fewer phone calls during the weekend. And almost everybody calls almost everybody else. That was boring. What was interesting, third or fourth chicken feed was amazing, actually. It doesn't show very well, so let me. So this is a 4 million vector, right? In all those 4 million people in this, the second latent concept, there was only one person who was participating in that concept. In the V vector, 4 million people again, there were only 5 people participating. They all had more or less the same number of phone calls coming into them, obviously from this guy. And this whole activity lasted for 1, 2, 3 days, then it disappeared. Everything was anonymized, fortunately or unfortunately, it was anonymized, so we don't know who was this person, whether it was a company calling other companies or something strange, so we call it the cousins, right? So this is the uncle who is calling all the cousins to do something probably strange, right? Because this is 200 phone calls at the same time, this is weird. Right? And this was, we didn't have to do anything, that was just the output of the singular value of the parafact decomposition, right? This was joint work with Miguel Arroyo and other colleagues. Yes, we have time for neurosemantics. So the other discovery was on the coupled matrix factorization. We said that if we have a tensor here, subject, verb, object, right, and we have additional information, we want to find the chicken feed for the tensor, and we also want to do the pairs for the matrix, but we want the red vector to be exactly like this red vector. This red vector, AF, should be exactly like this AF. This is getting a little bit detailed, but the idea is that we had data from objects. So here are photographs of objects, a dog, a blank photograph to avoid fixation, right? And then airplane, and then clear the mind, and then the photograph of an eye and the hammer. This is the brain scan of the person. We see a lot of activity in some parts. And for every object, we had roughly 200 questions. Is it alive? Can it fit in your hand? Can you eat it? Can it attack you? Can it hurt you? So the person had to answer yes or no. Dog, can it eat you? No. Is it alive? Yes, right? And so on. And we record the brain activity, right? So if we do the joint decomposition of all these pieces of information, this is a tensor, so this is a matrix tensor coupled factorization. since we don't have a lot of time, we'll go directly to the end. So here are the major latent variables. So the most fascinating of them was the third one, this one, right? Let's magnify it, and it says that the nouns were glass, tomato, and bell. The questions that were activated were, can you pick it up, does it hold in your hand, is it smaller than a golf ball? And what is even more impressive was that the parts where there was a lot of activity was the premotor cortex, which is the part of the brain that gets activated when we're moving, when we're moving. So just the thought of something, can you pick it up, involves motion, can you hold in one hand, involves motion, just the thought of a motion created the brain activity of the actual motion. So this is one latent variable. And this is part of the neurosemantics project. The paper appeared in SDM 2014. So the conclusions is that when we have time-evolving or heterogeneous graphs, we can model them as tensors. Parafact is a well-known tool that will find the triplets we're interested in, and of course there are many follow-up tools that can do sparse decomposition, they can do also non-negative decomposition and so on. For large data sets, there are the best tool for Parafact so far is the one that works on MATLAB, therefore it expects everything to fit in memory. But we are working, there are tools that are published that work on Hadoop, and they can work on arbitrarily large tensors as long as they fit in the HDFS. And so these are almost end of the presentation. We are thankful to the funding agencies, and of course, standard disclaimer, this is my opinions and not the funding agencies. These are the people who participated, and Alex and Vangelis Papalexakis are graduating this year. And the first low-level conclusion is that for big data, patterns and anomalies go hand in hand. And the large data sets can help us discover patterns that otherwise would be invisible, like the adult advertisers we saw for the Twitter data. The second question is that tensor is a powerful tool and can help us analyze multi-mode, three-mode data, subject, verb, objects, and many more. This is again the book, which is freely available from all the libraries. And the big take-home message is that cross-disciplinarity is vital. So for the first project, we had state-of-the-art hardware, M45, state-of-the-art software. Back then, Hadoop was the main tool, and also needed a linear algebra to find the triangles. For the second project, again, we need linear algebra, we need tensors, and we needed the medical collaborators to help us with the neurosemantics. And this is the end of the presentation. 8 minutes. Thank you.
For a few questions. Please.
Very interesting talk, thank you. Just one quick question. So when you were mentioning the blocks, and you said it was actually a very nice situation when this happens, and we are very lucky. But what did you observe in your real life, and how hard did it increase the complexity when these blocks don't overlap, for example?
Very good question. So the question is what happens when the blocks don't overlap? In that case, first of all, I should correct, we found blocks in real data, but usually they are fraudsters. And I can point you to the papers. This is paper PKTD 14. When there are such beautiful real blocks, something is wrong, right? Robots, scripts, right? When real people don't have this nice lockstep behavior, so in that case, there are deviations. So sometimes we see many more non-zeros here, which create interesting patterns. I have to draw these patterns to you. Some of these patterns have explanations, and I can draw them to you offline. But very good question, yes.
So the fMRI stuff looked very interesting, and I was just curious, especially since Tom Mitchell was part of that work. Have you looked at all on how the different brain areas that were activated might be connected to the language side of the questions? So you asked language-based questions, and were there any questions that may overlap, such as is the dog near the ball, and you find brain areas that are somehow related, anything like that?
Yes, very good question. So the question was the language part of the brain get activated? Actually, yes, it was. Let me clarify, the question was not follow a history. The question was, here's a drawing, can it help you? Is it alive, right? So it was much simpler than that. But what we were discussing was that first it was the visual part, because the visual part was getting activated because it had to recognize the shape. And then the language part would get activated. Actually, let's take it back. There was another experiment where we would show the string dog, D-O-G, right? And then the visual part would get activated first, do edge detection, and then the language part would get activated, and then the person would answer yes or no. So yes, you're right. The language part eventually would get activated. Yes?
You still have time?
We have
still have time.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Can you tell us a bit more about the verification of the fraud detection? You had access to the real eBay data, right?
Not really. No, we didn't have at all. And actually, we were scared whether eBay would be mad, but it was not. They were not after all, and actually invited Polo to give a talk, so that was all good. So the verification was done anecdotally because we ran the algorithm today. We spotted those guys are strange, and then a week later we noticed how many of them were deleted by eBay.
So you downloaded the data?
We crawled the data, and yes, we crawled the data. And it was not the full data, the full eBay data, right? It was whatever our rate limit would allow, right? And you're right, the verification is a very, very difficult. Even, this is a very good question, so let me elaborate to illustrate how difficult it is to do evaluation, right? So this was the copycats, that was the full power of Facebook, right? This is important for Facebook, so they didn't mind spending money. Even they don't know exactly who is fraudster. So what happens when the algorithm says that, hey, these guys are fraudsters, then a few engineers, highly paid engineers, sit down and they look them up and they check, and then they say, yes, from the people you told us, 90% are fraudsters, right? Did we catch them all? Nobody knows. Do we know for sure that those 90% are fraudsters? No, that's what the engineers believe, right? So evaluation is super, super difficult, right? Even if you are within Facebook. If you're outside Facebook, it's even worse, yeah. Yes.
So it's kind of a follow-up maybe question to this, because I was thinking about it. So first for eigenvalues. So you mentioned that it's enough to compute to get to first top 10 or top 15.
Right.
So
for triangles.
For triangles, yes.
For triangles.
Triangles. So how long does it take? What is it? So on a maybe supercomputer, I mean, I don't know what you use to actually compute those eigenvalues.
So it's linear on the number of edges.
Yes, linear
Yes.
number of edges, yes.
So I don't remember exactly if that was the supercomputer. Probably I don't remember, but it's definitely less than a day. Probably hours. Yeah.
Yes, and the follow-up is that you mentioned that the algorithms for fraud detection were run regularly, and the question is that can this be adapted to detect anomalies in real kind of time to prevent further kind of damage?
Depends on the trade-offs, right? So Facebook did not want to say too much about how often they run the algorithm and how, right? Not even how many machines. My student could not tell me how many machines they were running it on, right? So I guess it will be an engineering decision, right? Let's run it once a day or once a week, because that's a good trade-off between how many guys we catch and how much resource we burn. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. Yes.
So, like in the talk you showed using MapReduce to do the mining. I was wondering, because nowadays there are many of the kind of big data engine for graph mining, like Neo4j, Prago, and those. Like, I was just wondering, do you have any comments saying, like, which of those tools like is good for what kind of scenarios? Or or maybe map reduces just.
Very good question. So it depends on the data set, depends on the specs, depends on what is already there, right? If the data set is small and fits in memory, MATLAB, right? Quite MATLAB. If it's a little bit bigger, then maybe a single node or a few node Hadoop, right? Or Spark, right? And then so on and so forth, right? If it's even bigger, then if it's already stored on HDFS, then yes, of course, Hadoop or Spark, right? But all these methods, and actually now we are trying to show that all these algorithms can be done using a straightforward SQL, the structured query language of Postgres and Oracle, right? Because most of them eventually become joins. You have a matrix, you have a vector, you want to multiply them, so this is a two-way join, and followed by a group by, right? So SQL might be good enough to write.
Well, thank you, Christos. It was really a privilege to have you here, and thank you for this fascinating view into the world of patterns.